on the SBE meetings link. The meeting is also audio streamed through a link located at the bottom of the Assembly agenda. I'll now read the ethics statement that is required of us. Committee members, we are reminded that it is our duty to avoid conflicts of interest and the appearance of conflicts of interest as we handle the work of this committee. Does any member of the committee know of any conflict of interest or any appearance of conflict with respect to any matters coming before us at this meeting? If so, please state them for the record. If during the course of the meeting you become aware of an actual or apparent conflict of interest, please bring the matter to the attention of the chair. It will then be your duty to abstain from participating in discussion on the matter and from voting on the matter. So with that, we'll move to approve the agenda for today, January 25th, 2022. Committee members, you've had an opportunity to review the proposed agenda for today's meeting. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda? Renee, do we need to unmute some folks?
We have so moved by David Dean.
Okay. And do we have a second? Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
We have a second, Tamika Walker.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. If there's any further discussion. Okay. Hearing none, those in favor, please say aye or indicate aye. Okay. Anyone opposed?
None opposed.
All right. So thank you. So we'll move to approval of the minutes for December 8th, 2021. The minutes from our previous committee meeting on December 8th, 2021 have been prepared and made available to you. Do I have a motion to approve these minutes?
Amy Marshall, motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
John Simpkins, second.
Thank you. A motion and a second to the minutes. Is there any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, those in favor, please say aye.
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 And the motion is approved, so thank you. So we're going to move on to, as I mentioned at the top of this meeting, so I'm currently serving as the interim chair. We are set to elect a chair and a vice chair for this committee. The chair and vice chair will work directly with OLR staff to prepare agendas, presentations, and other work as it comes before the committee. Renee will hold a virtual WebEx poll where committee members will have 5 minutes to vote online. Renee will read the results but not declare the winner. Okay, so then I will then read the votes again and declare the winner for our chair and vice chair. Renee, if you'll please open the poll.
Michael, we do need to do roll before we start.
I'm sorry, I jumped ahead of us.
No?
Can you take the roll, please?
Yes. Sharonda Fleming.
Present.
John Simpkins.
Present.
Jenny Ogg.
Present.
Crystal Grant. Lisa Phillips.
Present.
Nadia Trey.
Present.
Sarah Bigley.
Present.
Luann Llewellyn.
Present as an observer only.
Adam Johnson.
Present.
Maureen Stover.
Present.
Eugenia Floyd.
Present.
Jenny Watson.
Present.
Margaret McLaughlin Howard.
Present.
Denise Tillery. Michelle White. Andrew Houlihan.
Present.
Valerie Bridges. Present. Jeremy Wallace. Tanita Filial Rogers. Lucia Riley.
Present.
David Dean.
Present.
Catherine Oxendine.
Present.
Simran Fitzpatrick.
Present.
Brenda Stevens.
Present.
Lucy Edwards.
Present.
Tamika Walker Kelly.
Present.
Amy Marshall.
Present.
Billy Medlin. Terrence Ruth.
Present.
Terry Stoops.
Here.
Stephen Gay.
Present.
Sandeep Agarwal. And Tina Lance.
Present.
We did have quorum before we began, but I will officially announce we do have quorum.
Thank you. Okay, so now can we open the virtual WebEx poll?
Yes. You should be able to see your choices on the right side of the screen. Choose one for the ARC Committee Chair, one for the ARC Committee Vice Chair. And you have 5 minutes. The poll is timed.
And Renee, OLR staff are non-voting, correct?
Correct. Just committee members, please.
We'll be ready to start in just a second.
So I will read the results, but allow Michael to declare the results. Amy Marshall has 10%, Jenny Fogg 0, Lisa Phillips 5, Terrence Ruth 5, Tamika Walker Kelly 13, Valerie Bridges 21, Michelle White 3, Sharonda Fleming 5, and that is for Art Committee Chair. The Art Committee Vice Chair, Jeremy Wallace 0, Eugenia Floyd 8, David Dean 5, Tamika Walker Kelly 10, Valerie Bridges 8, Nadja Trey 5, Sharonda Fleming 5, Maureen Stover 8, Amy Marshall 10, Tina Lance 0, Michelle White 3. And Michael, I'll let you declare the winners.
Okay, so with the greatest percentage of votes, the new chair of this, the committee member selected for a position of chair is Dr. Valerie Bridges. Dr. Bridges will serve through the completion of her term, and the term dates will be listed in the minutes. We have a tie for vice chair with Ms. Walker Kelly and Ms. Marshall, and so Ms. Habersetzer is going to create a new poll. We will ask you to vote again at the end of the committee, at the end of the meeting today for vice chair, and we'll put a poll up with the two finalists for that position and then ask folks to vote again.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay, thank you. Congratulations, Dr. Bridges. We look forward to working with you in subsequent meetings, building out our agenda and wrangling all this work. Okay, so from here, we're going to move on and begin with we have a few presentations, and I know early in this committee now, it's been a lot of presenting at this point, so you're getting a full kind of scope of the work. We do anticipate that in subsequent meetings, we will begin to start transitioning to more of an active role for committee members because we will have some decisions that have to be made, but we want you to be kind of in the know, as it were, with what's happening with the ESSER 3 programs, some of the program updates, programs that are going to be launched this summer, as well as some of the other work going on at the agency. So with that, I'm going to start today with Mr. Freeburg McKinney, who's going to talk a little bit about district visits and voices.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see so many familiar faces on here. I'll really welcome the opportunity to share very briefly about an initiative that started very early on in how the state worked to transcend the impact of COVID. And so I just wanted to briefly kind of go over the what and the why. And as our team early in COVID, we're seeking ways to build bridges between our districts, our statewide partnerships with the Department of Public Instruction and the State Board of Education, as well as with the General Assembly. We realized that the best way to do this was just to go out into the field, not in a triage sense, but in a relationship building sense, and just work with our districts, listen and learn from them, look at the challenges and struggles, but also look at the solutions that they were building and the partnerships that they were forming as they collectively transcended COVID's impact. And so the what of the District and Visits Voices team continues to join our local, our regional, and our state partners in that bridge building process. We also look, as we'll learn a little bit later on, into those foundational examples of promising practices or pockets of practice that we can then look at, learn from, and then share out with our statewide partners. So these focus on the priorities of the State Board of Education Strategic Plan and Superintendent Catherine Truitt's Operation Polaris, They include equity, whole child support services, human capital pipeline development, looking at testing and accountability, early childhood literacy, workforce development, and that college and career readiness, really supported by the district regional transformation team and our regional directors who have been fundamental in building this relationship out. So the why is, again, in building that network. And we're working with teachers and schools and districts and community partnerships so that the team can really have a deep understanding of what's going on at the local level, bring that insight back to the State Board of Education and our colleagues at DPI, and continue to build out a robust conduit system for whether that's needs or resources or advocacy or voice, or just celebrating what our districts are doing, what our teachers are doing, and our schools are doing. And we feel like this is a foundational strategy and strengthening the overall relationship and partnership between all of our statewide educational partners. Next slide, please. These are just a few pictures that kind of symbolize what those visits have. If you go back one slide, I'm sorry. Yeah, there we go. So we went to Halifax County and we learned about their solar energy summer camps. There's Dr. Maher there. Literally students in 3 weeks were learning about solar panels, teaching us how they connect them, how they read them, how they fix them. It was such an incredible opportunity to learn from them. Then you can see we visit teachers. This is Susanna Serrato of Asheville City Schools, who is the Western Regional Teacher of the Year. We learn from culinary staffs as they share in their passions. This was in Brunswick County. And then we also just try to build relationships wherever our districts feel like they may need some support. This is our former State Teacher of the Year, Maureen Stober, and our work with Joe Co-Teach and their teacher cadets and beginning teachers. So you can see it's just an array of relationship building at multiple levels. Next slide, please. We even engage in community events. So this is Senator Corbin, Kevin Corbin, out in Macon County, and invited our team to watch Haywood County play football. It's their big game. We worked with Burke County and learning about Mr. Ted Pedro and the family educator role that he plays with an enclave of Guatemalan community. And then again, trying to engage our General Assembly members. Here we are with Senator Davis and Dr. Miller, who chairs Pepsi and is the superintendent of Greene County. Again, just solidifying those relationships and gaining a deeper understanding of what our districts and how they're serving our students. Next slide, please. I did also want to share quickly, after our team continued to present at the State Board of Education meetings, we realized that there was a real opportunity to go a little deeper here. So instead of just kind of sharing out about these visits and what we're seeing, to really look at next level support and how we can then build this out into an even more foundational, meaningful, and authentic practice. So the chair of the State Board of Education, Eric Davis, formed the Government and Community Affairs Committee chaired by Wendell Hall and vice chaired by Jill Kamnitz. And this pulls together multiple members of DPI, including the Community Affairs team, myself, Julie Pittman, who is a Special Advisor for Teacher Engagement, Tabari Wallace, who's a Special Advisor for Principal Engagement, Christy Van Auken, who is the Special Advisor for Workforce Engagement, and multiple members of DPI's working groups, as well as the Office of Learning, Recovery, and Acceleration. The purpose of this committee, again, is provide that collaborative cross-functional strategy. So again, taking the District Visits and Voices initiative and really broaden it out by deepening those community partnerships with multiple organizations across the state and tying them back as we look to implement the strategic plan of the State Board of Education, reflecting Operation Polaris, as well as the Leandro Comprehensive Remedial Plan. And that focus, we've coined a term called educator diplomacy, which allows the North Carolina public school system to join, and again, in a multiplicity of ways, our State Board of Education, our department, the General Assembly, our schools, our students, our district, our community partners, to really support this system in its entirety. I wanted to give you a few resources. As you're going to hear with the rest of the presentations today, there's new layers to this, and we're really excited to join forces with the Office of Learning, Recovery, and Acceleration and multiple partners within DPI as we build out a promising practice and pockets of practice initiative moving forward to deepen that support. These are some resources that hopefully you can use, stay connected to the work. There are multiple education legislation reports here. We have a district visits and voices blog, and also we present every month at the State Board of Education meeting. So that report is really a newsletter that we launch every Friday and goes through a plethora of information and resources, and really just keeping everybody abreast of the work of all the members of this team. These are the three main priorities that we're currently focused on, and I thought that would again lend a little more support as what we're hearing from the field of where they need more support. They need, just more examples of some innovative practices that our districts are using to strengthen statewide support for district student mental health, to really coordinate and consolidate partnerships with PSUs and other statewide organizations and looking at teacher recruitment and retention strategies, particularly in diversifying the workforce. And then also, as we just spent 2 days with App State and the Wright College of Education, really broadening out our partnerships with community colleges and our EPPs as to how we strengthen and increase communication and collaboration. So that ends this part of the presentation, and I don't know if we're going to wait till questions on the end, but if there are any questions, I would welcome those. I think this ending visual just gives you a beautiful glimpse of the breadth and the width of this team's work. We've been to almost 90 districts as of right now over the last 2 years of this initiative. I know Dr. Houlihan is on here. We've been to Union County. Early on in the process, I know we visited Dr. Bridges and her team and learned from many of their incredible educators. And I know that Dr. Marr and Maureen and Dr. Molinex have all been part of these visits and in this listening and learning tour. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Freebird. We do actually have a couple of minutes. We're a little bit ahead on the agenda. So I want to just say two things. One, I think that it's really important that we recognize that the pandemic has taken its toll on students, on teachers, on administrators, on families. It has been a very difficult time. But it's some of the work like this, trying to identify these areas of really good things that have been happening in the way in which schools and communities have really responded. This is really important work. And so we'll get a little bit into the promising practices next, but we do have a few minutes if folks want to ask Freebird any questions.
And Dr. Amar, one of the questions I often get is, how are these districts selected? And I cannot overstate the importance of the partnership that we've developed with the regional directors. And so we've kind of just put the word out there that we'd love to listen and learn to anyone who's willing to share. And so I would argue that the majority of these visits actually offered up the opportunity for us to come. And then we've really strategized, like if we're listening for retention, promising practice. So if we're looking at CTE, and really innovative strategies to work with student engagement and workforce development, kind of targeting those districts who we believe do have those promising practices we like to share. But I did want to address that because I know that's probably a question that might arise.
I didn't have a question for Freebird, but just looking at the map, I just wanted to say it's amazing. I think this speaks to the work that's happening and the support that's coming from DPI to our districts to show the good work that's happening. I mean, when you look at this map, there are a few spaces missing. And I know you'll fill those in as time kind of continues, but this is absolutely amazing. And of course, at Edgecombe, we loved your visit. You are welcome to come back again. But this is good work. This is what should be happening throughout our state, and you all are doing it. So thank you.
Thank you for your support. You've been incredible in that. And we look forward to your leadership here and on many other levels. So thank you.
Okay, so if there aren't any additional questions, Freebird, thank you again for your time and your service. And we'll move on and have Dr. Mullenix talk a little bit about promising practices.
All right, thank you, Dr. Marr. Good afternoon, everyone. I follow Freebird very nicely here because as Freebird and some of the other District Visits and Voices teams were going out and seeing some of these amazing things happening, across our state and continue to learn about these practices across the state. We started talking internally about the now what and what are we going to do with this information. And we came back to an original idea that Dr. Segal had back in 2019 when I first came to the department. And he mentioned as a superintendent of Newton-Conover City Schools that one of the ways he knew about things happening in other districts was because he called the Hickory Public Schools superintendent, and he talked to him and said, "What are you doing?" Or he would call Union County and he would talk to the superintendent, right? But other than that, there really wasn't a network to support information sharing across the state. And so we came back to that initial idea, but with a specific focus on, and Renee, you can go to the next slide if you'd like, with a specific focus on Operation Polaris, and our state board strategic plan, as well as the use of ESSER funds and pandemic relief. So looking at those promising practices that are specifically tied to those pieces and making sure that we are sharing information as accurately and timely as possible. And through that, we're developing several assets. One of those is a promising practices clearinghouse. And I'm actually going to know the launch date for that today. We were going to launch it this week, but I think it will be in the next week or so. And once we launch that, it will be housed under the OLR website. And it will be, it's through a Tableau dashboard, so there are filtering functions, and that will continue to grow month by month. We have, as you see on here, we have monthly rollouts of themes. So as we looked at January, we had several sites that had some really great happenings regarding work-based learning. And so we had 5 districts that we highlighted. And with that, we have infographics, a video, and some other assets. All of those are linked into that clearinghouse. And once it's live, you'll be able to play around with it and see. As we move into February, we're looking at teacher housing initiatives. We have just a variety of teacher housing initiatives from the west to the east. All the way to one in Bertie County that doesn't even have the housing built, but it was so innovative how they used the community ARP funds to help fund that housing that we felt it was really valuable to get that information out sooner than later so that superintendents and could talk to their community leaders and see if that was something they could do also while those that ARP funding is still there and available. So that one will be included. I'm really excited about that. Not a lot of pictures since it's not built, but the concept is really awesome. We're even highlighting some programs in partnership with other institutions like Duke University's Teach House. That will be one in February. And then there's a few others out to our west. And then as we move into March, I'm just kind of giving you a high-level overview to get your wheels turning, and I'll get to why in a second. As we move into March, we're looking at some Grow Your Own programs. So Dr. Bridges, one of those highlights there is with Matt Bristow-Smith and the program there at the early college. And really talking about ways to grow that teacher pipeline. Some various programs from teacher cadet programs, just different variety of programs, just trying to share that information of if you have a problem with the teacher pipeline, which I think everyone sees that across the state and across the nation, then what is one thing you could do? It might not be an immediate result, But if you do that and a couple other things, it might result in, increased teacher retention over time. As we move into April, May, June, July, we have some other themes that we'll be focusing on. You can go ahead and go to the next slide, Renee. On the clearinghouse, once we have it launched, you will see a link at the bottom of the clearinghouse. I don't know if Renee's able to go to the next slide. No, maybe not. Okay. Once you have the clearinghouse, you'll be able to go to the link at the bottom of the clearinghouse, and you can self-submit. We've kind of been controlling these, so to speak, as we rolled this out because it's a new initiative, and we wanted to make sure we were, doing our due diligence to get that information. Renee, I'm not sure. I don't see slides anymore. I'm going to keep going because I know the content, but just to let you know, I don't see slides.
It's I took the slides down, Jenny, because it's frozen. I'm going to bring them back up momentarily.
Okay, cool. As we now got our, feet underneath of us, we are opening that link up to have self-submissions. So, Dr. Houlihan, you have something in Union County that, you think, hey, this is really worthwhile for other people. And I know you do because I see your stuff on Twitter. If you think this is really worthwhile to share, we want people to share it to us. And while we have all these assets we're trying to create, capacity-wise, we have one person, which is me, writing the infographics, and we have one graphics designer. So capacity-wise, we can't create all the assets we would love to create. But what we can do is take that information that is submitted into the Qualtrics survey, and we can share that spreadsheet publicly, which we plan to do and update it every 90 days. So that you can go in and you can sort through if you want to see all the ones that have been submitted for teacher housing, then you can go through and filter it out and only look at that. We're also adding some demographic features to the filtering. That'll happen probably in February or so, February, March, where you can filter out by population, student population, teacher population, demographics, meaning racial or male, female, just various ways that we have the statistics there on the DPI statistical profile so that you can filter it out and really try to get it as close to your district needs as possible. Again, that last slide that will probably pop up here shortly is just the strands that we're really focusing on in those target areas. Once the clearinghouse launches, you'll see those strands, and there's also examples with each of those strands. So while it might be improving literacy, there are many examples as to what that means. So we want to try and help you generate, sometimes we come across something, and I'll give an example is we talked to Durham, and they were doing internships with students for IT internships, where they were helping to build their human capital pipeline and also give students an opportunity to engage in internships. And when we talked to Durham, they said, well, we've been doing internships for a long time. This isn't innovative. Right, we understand that, but the way you're doing it is you're using certain funds from pandemic recovery, from the GEAR funds, and also you are helping to re-engage those students who might not have been engaged when the pandemic hit and we had such a struggle with our 9 through 12 students being interested in the schooling process. So once we kind of talked through to them, they were like, oh, okay, now we see we could really help and share this information to other districts. So, while it might not be something that you think is innovative, it really could be, and it could be useful to others. And so we invite you to share that. And any questions you have, just let me know. You can always reach out to me by email, and I'm happy to respond. And that is my portion, but I don't know who's next.
Thank you, Angie. Quick question as Renee's getting stuff teed up for the next section. Well, obviously questions for Dr. Mullinex, but and if folks are hearing things out in the field, can they fill out that promising practice as well? Should they shoot you an email if they hear of great things that they'd love the team to research or look into?
So that's a great question, Lynn. So the questionnaire is anybody can submit it because it actually asks who the person is that's submitting it. But in that questionnaire, it does prompt you to acknowledge if the district or charter or PSU that it's about is aware, because we definitely don't want superintendents or charter leaders having something out there and highlighted that they may not feel comfortable being publicly acknowledged for whatever reason. Maybe it's not fully developed, or maybe there's some issues that have come up. So in that questionnaire, yeah, I think anybody could submit it. It just requires, that permission piece. And certainly we have many layers embedded in the approval process of what we write up. So just kind of a little brief overview of how this goes. So let's say I hear that Dr. Houlihan has a school that is just, excelling in, maybe they've already done their science of reading training and they're already seeing growth as a result of it. Maybe they were an early adopter, right? So I reach out to the school district and the school, either through the regional director or through the district visits and voices team. And I say, hey, we've heard that this is happening. We'd really like to highlight it. Are you interested? And if they say, no, we're not interested, which hasn't happened yet, but certainly there might be reasons, and that's perfectly okay. If they say we're interested, then I say, okay, wonderful. Would you like to get on a Teams call and talk me through? Do you prefer that I come out there? Because sometimes they do want somebody else to come back out there and see it again. Or do you feel comfortable going ahead and filling out this questionnaire for me? And then the questionnaire is what I use to help write up that infographic. And I typically then will read, if they do the questionnaire, I'll reach back out to them if I have questions. I write up the infographic, and then I send them a draft for approval. And I do that because you never know if somebody who submitted it may have, there might have been turnover, or they might have, gotten some information incorrect. So I turn that back over to the district. The district can edit it and, make sure I have it how they want it conveyed. I ask them if there are any additional photos they want added in, any other people, specific quotes they want added in, that sort of thing. And then what we do is they'll reach out to the district and discuss either videoing or writing up a longer write-up about the practice. So there's several ways that we're not just, getting the information from the district and putting something out there. It is a back and forth process to make sure that everything, and we've had an infographic that was completely rewritten from the person who submitted it to the one that we finalized, and that's perfectly okay. We are not going to push something on anyone or put something out in public that we don't have 100% support of. So that was a long response to your question, Lynn.
Angie, I have a quick comment and then a question. So my comment is, I love this concept. I've always said that in education, one of the things that drives me crazy is the constant reinventing of the wheel. And my philosophy is identify a best practice, go steal it, and make it fit your local context. So thank you for pulling all this together. My question is, oftentimes, district leaders, school leaders, teachers want to go see that promising practice firsthand as opposed to just reading about it. So in this kind of portal, if either by strand or by topic or by idea, is there going to be contact information for someone at the district level that you reach out to if you're interested in learning more, or, a name, a phone number, someone that I can say, if Valerie is doing something phenomenal, and I really want to go study that or send a team to her district, who do I reach out to? Is that going to be part of this, or are we going to have to kind of dig around for that?
So that's a great point. And when we first started talking about this 2 years ago, I think it was Bev Emery who brought that up and said, are we going to allow that or are we not? Because that's probably going to be a want. We have not gotten to the point where we are adding contact information other than on the infographic. You'll see every infographic has a district section. It's like a district spotlight. It provides the superintendent's name, a picture of the superintendent, and information about the school district, or if it's a charter, it would have information about the school charter. So we're not giving it to you. We're providing the name and contact information. But right now, we just felt like we weren't quite at a place where we felt comfortable to say, and now can we have people reach out to you about this practice? Because after kind of gauging, this is an additional thing that we're asking districts to do for us, to either have more site visits or fill out this questionnaire and kind of that back and forth. We just kind of felt like right now, hearing from the field, and maybe this kind of eases up, hopefully, as COVID hopefully kind of eases up. But right now, we felt like the field was just so overwhelmed with stuff that putting that out there to contact the district, blatantly saying like, here's the contact information, go forward in email or phone, might be too overwhelming for districts and charters. So I think we'll get to a place where we do that, because I remember Dr. Emery saying districts were going to want to do that. I just don't think we as a department are there yet in our comfort level with putting that on school districts, and the possibility of, and it may or may not happen, but the possibility of a lot of different phone calls and emails requesting visits, especially with the health safety concern and people coming into the school. Because I think Freebird, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Freebird still sometimes does have districts and charters that aren't comfortable with even them coming into the school, just because of the pandemic and some of the protocols that they're following depending on where they're at. So I think yes, eventually, but not quite yet. So right now it's kind of you have to take that initiative.
Yeah, and I think it's important, Angie, right, to note that when we started talking about this, when we created OLR, we talked about doing some video and some other pieces, particularly for that purpose, Dr. Houlihan. And so this is kind of the first iteration of this as a product. We certainly see it expanding and changing and growing and getting better over time. Probably in these initial stages through the first couple of months, and until we start to, like Angie said, eventually when the pandemic wanes, we should have better kind of direct contact. But it might be the case now where it's more of a superintendent to superintendent conversation, where you see something and you reach out to, hey, Valerie, I'd love to come and visit and see this kind of thing. And then I know there was a question about when this launches. I think we're prepared to launch it in March. Is that right, Angie?
It's going to launch it was supposed to launch this week, but because Superintendent Truitt had some workforce things that are launching, Blair is going to give me, our comms director is going to give me the date by close of business today. So I may have that before we get off the line today, but it will be in the next week or week and a half that it goes live. So definitely, and there will be a press release with it that will come out through the DPI listserv to let you know that it's out there and how to access it.
Yeah, and to Mika's point, this is a little bit of what one of the reasons we really wanted to get this out the door was there are a lot of innovative programs and practices that are happening across the state. When I came on board here, we talked a little bit about something like the WebEx clearinghouse at the U.S. Department of Ed. But I think the issue is the WebEx clearinghouse isn't very usable for a district or a school, right? I mean, it's the way it's structured. And so we wanted to stay away from this idea of only putting out quote unquote best practices when there are these other things that we can really test to see if they work and in fact lead us to kind of better outcomes for kids. And so that was the whole vein of this is let's get some things out there. Let's let people see it. Let's test it. And then let's push it forward. And then there was a question, Angie, about one area of the state versus others.
Mm-hmm. So on one question we have on the questionnaire is the state board region. We are, when we highlight these, we are trying to make sure, I think I've now, over January, February, March, I think I've hit all of the state board regions, but we're trying to spread out these practices across the state, and it's actually working. I mean, we're not even really trying to, it's just happening that they're happening across the state. It just may be that because we can only really capacity-wise do about 5 infographics a month, capacity-wise, is quite a task to do those. And so, you know, the 5 that we have for January, that means we're missing 3 of the state board regions because there's 8 state board regions, right? So, and there might be a couple in one state board region, you know, at some point, but we are definitely trying to make sure we are spreading the love across the entire state. And that is why we're opening up that questionnaire for self-submissions, because we know, even though the District Visits and Voices team is out there and there are others that are out there in districts, we know there are district leaders, charter leaders who may not want to, you know, post something on social media, or who may not, just may not want to share anything, you know, because maybe they just don't know that they, you know, should be sharing something for whatever reason. And so we want to invite them to do that because it's really a way that we can all grow and share that information. One thing I did forget, Dr. Houlihan, as one of the assets, and we're just working on this, so don't quote me because it's truly a work in progress. For April, our theme is authentic learning, and looking at schools that are focusing on project-based learning or some authentic learning approaches, not necessarily work-based learning though, trying to focus on the project-based learning aspect of that. And one school that we went out and visited in December that kind of, you know, triggered that theme for April as we lead into our summer months and summer programming, and we're seeing more innovative practices with the summer programming, is Foothills Community School in McDowell County. And so I brought a digital teaching and learning consultant with me on that visit. And it's, if you've heard of Stacy Lovedahl and Molly Holloman, they are working on the VR project across the state, the virtual reality. So Stacy came with me and brought her GoPro, and she did panoramic photos of the whole school. And then I audio recorded the visit, and then I go back and I'm, you know, filling in like snippets of the photos so that we'll create a virtual reality experience of the school. So because you can't, you know, might not be able to go visit a school, that might be an additional option to have those virtual reality experiences, especially as we think about like project-based learning, where you really need to see that happening to understand what it looks like. And like literacy, as we look at science of reading and some of those strategies for improving reading instruction. Another way that virtual reality can bring the classroom to people if people can't go to the classroom. So I just wanted to highlight that also.
So I had a question. So one of my questions, I really enjoy like the clearinghouse of having all the best practices together. And so my question is, in these profiles of promising practices, does it also include which buckets of money or how much money of their funds each school district or PSU used in order to implement these practices? Because we know that each school district across the state got varying amounts of money, and so I don't want a district to be discouraged because, oh, we don't have the same amount of money, so we can't implement that practice. So is that detail included in the infographic as well?
So it doesn't drill down to like, I'm going to use Bertie County as an example. It doesn't drill down to say Bertie County received this amount of funding. It does drill down to say that Bertie County is a small, low wealth district, and that they used when they set up their housing, they got the loan from the 15-year loan from the State Employees Credit Union Foundation. The 15-year loan at 0% interest, no payment until the building is complete and occupied. And then it details that the other three entities, so Bertie County Schools and the local funding that they used to pay an additional $160,000. The town of Windsor that contributed $160,000 from their ARP funds. And I think it's Bertie County at large that contributed, I don't have it sitting in front of me, but I think that's the third, that contributed $160,000 because State Employees Credit Union wants to make sure that the others have skin in the game if they're going to put that funding in. So it gives it that detail to say, I think it's a general enough detail to get an idea that, okay, if I'm a district and I want to do this and I might be a small, low wealth district, this might be a model that would work. Or if you're a larger district, I'm sure Dr. Houlihan's wheels are spinning of what would that look like in Union County that has a totally different, funding, local funds, things like that could happen. So I think I don't know if it's the detail that you're wanting, but I think it's detail that will give enough information to help to start digging in to what you could tap into within your local district or community. And certainly none of this this isn't a legislative thing. So if you read these, we are always open to ideas and suggestions. If you read these and you say, Angie, you need to be using this, I don't take offense to any of that, because I think if we can make the whole thing better, then we need to try and do that. So please make sure, and I'm gonna see what that means. I'll talk to Michael offline and see what that means, with the money that was given out. See if there's some way that I can work that in, or if it's when it is applicable to the particular practice. But yeah, I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, I think that it's also important to remember that so the pandemic and recovery money presented us with an opportunity to launch the Promising Practices Clearinghouse. This has actually been something that DPI has talked about, precedes us here. So folks have been talking about this, but they've not had the capacity to put it out because they didn't have either the staffing or the funding or the opportunity. And so what we want to be really mindful of too is that the programs that we're highlighting as promising practices are not always or only pandemic recovery programs. That in some instances, these programs have existed pre-pandemic, and we want this clearinghouse to exist post-pandemic, right? So we're laying the foundation now for something here in North Carolina that, doesn't really, perhaps it exists in some other states, but really this is something that lasts beyond just COVID, and that we're building out a model for continuous improvement over time, regardless of federal funding, state funding, local, whatever the funding source might be. But certainly we will try to figure out the financial piece of this and how we as an agency are helpful in thinking about that.
One question definitely on the questionnaire is associated costs. I will say that I have had a district who chose to not. They said they did not want to disclose that information, and so I just pulled it off. So it kind of depends too, to the extent that they want to provide us that information as well.
That's helpful. Thank you.
I also had a question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, jump right in.
In this work, we've been talking a lot about the best promising practices. And for me as a classroom teacher, my first go-to is, what are the things that the teachers are doing that I'm not doing in my classroom that I could be using in my classroom too? And when I see things like strengthening literacy, are there certain, maybe even curriculums that districts have purchased that they will possibly be able to embed in here as well as something that they have data around that shows an improvement? So, or something that has turned their district around as well in certain areas. When I'm thinking about literacy or even other mathematics or whatever it may be, is there going to be space in there as well in the promising strands at all? That's my first question. And then my next question, well, I'll let you answer that one first because I think it's kind of connected. Go ahead.
Yeah, definitely if it's connected to, a certain curriculum, especially the literacy. I actually just got a message today from a principal that said, hey, what is what is a curriculum that goes with science of reading? I said, well, we can't advocate for a specific curriculum at the department, but here are some early adopter districts that you might want to reach out to. And in the same way as a district might be an early adopter to the science of reading, the letters training, and they might have already started seeing some results. They've probably already gone through the curriculum adoption process and would ideally, I think they would already be starting to share, like, what is that and what does it look like? But even if they didn't, that's a point for us to dig a little deeper and say, okay, we see you've got results, but what is the type of curriculum, what is it called? Because I think that helps to inform districts as they're making those large purchases and teachers in the classroom as well. And then I know you had a second question.
Yes, and it goes back to the money we were talking about, like the expenses that we'll be spending. I know that you said there is a line about expenditures as far as what the district is using as far as the promising practices. Does that also include possible grants that they have applied for, or grants that are available throughout our state? I know Maureen and our sponsors often talk about how we don't necessarily have a wide range of across our state applying for the grant, but if they knew that they could go to the clearinghouse and see, hey, this is what this grant did for this district, that might help that along as well.
Yeah, if it's tied to the particular practice, then we highlight it. We don't necessarily have, a database of grants and what that has resulted in. And Jenny may be able to help us out as we're thinking about this. And if there is some sort of database that does provide that in general, like IES grants and what have they gone to, I'm not sure if that exists out there. So that might be something Jenny can maybe look into that for us and see if that exists. But in terms of our work that we're putting out, if it's connected to a particular grant, I'm thinking of the Duke Teach House, and that has a very different funding structure because the university is helping to fund that. So however it's funded, we provide that information. And in my mind, it's so that if I was a superintendent, I could then look at similar funding structures in my community and try to do as close as possible. If it's a university, well, what university is in my school district, and see if I could partner with them in a similar way.
Thank you so much.
Great. Any other questions? Okay, so I think Renee is going to stop sharing, and I'm going to share my screen for just a couple of minutes. All right, and now I know I'm looking. All right, so you're going to see me that my screen is up, so I know that's awkward.
And Michael, I shared the link in the chat should people want to join on their computer as well.
Great. So what you're looking at here, what you're looking at here is, and let me give full credit to my team in OLR. I was tasked a couple of weeks ago with making a presentation to the North Carolina State Board of Education chairs. And really what they were interested in is some of the long-term planning that OLR is engaged in as it relates to pandemic recovery kind of writ large. And so what we tried to do here was lay out kind of a sense of the scale and scope of the work that we're involved in, and essentially give you a sense now of kind of the work that's been happening for the last couple of weeks, in addition to the work that's happened for the last few months. So first off, we are thinking about pandemic recovery from the OLR perspective, basically through what we're calling levers of change, and so 3 levers of change in particular. So that includes state-sponsored learning recovery programs. These are the programs that we talked a little bit about that OLR and DPI is actually managing. And so that includes our Summer Bridge program and our Career Accelerator. And then going forward, it will be our summer enrichment programming and then additional programs for after school, after school and before school time. So those are state-sponsored learning recovery programs. Our second lever of change is around this idea of a competency-based education platform. So the ESSER 3 funding provided $9 million for DPI to deploy a competency-based education platform. I think I talked about this a little bit in our last meeting, but essentially the RFP that we are developing, and this is something Angie has also spent a lot of time working on, the idea is that we have a platform available to educators across the state, and it will be an opt-in program by district. But essentially, it gives an opportunity to align standards and assessment results, right? So that a district can use a variety of assessments, put it into the system, and the system will create essentially a learner profile where it shows which standards students have demonstrated competence in or mastery in. And so that RFP is ongoing. We expect it to be available either late summer, but no later than hopefully the fall. And the idea here is it provides real-time diagnostic data for teachers and for parents and for district leaders and school leaders and the state. And then third, our third lever of change is around research and evaluation. And so this, of course, is a big part of the work that we're doing. We have a couple of ongoing studies. So we have the school extension program. And if you are unfamiliar with that, we presented to the state board last month. School extension was the summer learning program. Just a few of the highlights. We'll send you the link to the final report as soon as the Joint Ed Oversight Committee posts it on their website. But just some of the highlights. Districts across North Carolina, so all of our public schools, all of our LEAs across the state were required to run a summer learning program. Every district developed a summer learning program that was either 30 days or 6 weeks in duration. Our school districts across the state served nearly 250,000 children last summer. 250,000 children. The intent of that program was to serve primarily at-risk students, so those who have been most disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. And our kind of stated goal of the program was really about re-engagement. We wanted students, after a year of disrupted learning because of the pandemic, to have an opportunity to re-engage with teachers and with peers in their school. And I can't say enough about the work that districts, district staff, teachers, bus drivers, custodians, cafeteria workers, the amount of work they put in to pull off those summer programs was Herculean. So 250,000 students served. 86% of the children who participated were at risk. We had, in the high school level, more than 13,000 credits were earned by high school students. We had hundreds of students across the state who were not eligible to graduate, but because they went through the summer program, were able to graduate. And 60%, roughly 60% of the students who participated showed growth in either their reading or math scores or both in a voluntary summer program. So I did want to highlight how important we think that program was. We do believe it was a success. And we built 2 additional programs based on what we learned from that summer, and that was the Bridge Academies, which you heard about last time, and our Career Accelerator. A couple of other research studies we have going on. So we have an ESSER-funded study. In March, we will release the first study known as the Lost Instructional Time Impact Analysis. This is the first study of its kind nationally. It will be the comprehensive set of data on lost instructional time for students in North Carolina, and it will represent the first comprehensive data set in the country. And so I know folks maybe have seen some of the things put out by McKinsey or by Curriculum Associates or NWEA, and they may have talked about North Carolina in those data sets, but that is a sample of North Carolina students. what we have and what we have been working on for 9 months now is a full comprehensive analysis for North Carolina. And so we are going to release those results in March. Second, we have a virtual academy study going on looking at the guidelines around virtual academies and how we continue to run virtual academies post-pandemic. We have a couple of externally funded studies. So we just found out last week, we submitted an IES proposal in the summer. The title of that study was Assessing the Long-Term Impacts of School Extension Programs on Student Re-Engagement, Learning, and Recovery. That IES grant was funded. So we have our first $1 million grant coming into the Office of Learning and Recovery. We also have partners over in Chapel Hill at Epic who had a Spencer Foundation grant funded. We'll be working with them. This studies the long-run effects of the COVID pandemic on student, educator, and school outcomes, including families. And then additionally, we just submitted a letter of intent to work with partners over at Duke on an IES proposal looking at student health and well-being. And then we have a couple of other studies here in the agency, one around the remote learning survey, positive liars of the pandemic, the teacher working conditions survey, and then in discussion, we have some proposals with the North Carolina Policy Collaboratory. So I hope you can see we've got a number of studies that are either in the proposal stage, in the funding stage, or actually getting close to having data released. What you'll notice here is not only do we have quantitative data that we're going to release in March, but we're investing pretty heavily in qualitative data as well. We want to be able to tell the story of the pandemic. This qualitative data is really important in helping us understand and helping others understand what the full impact of the pandemic has been. Within the ESSER 3 appropriation, there were, as I'd mentioned earlier, some 30 different appropriations. What we have been trying to do, my team, is really move each of those individual items into one of 3 categories in terms of who they serve. So we have programs that serve primarily students, and so you'll see those right here on the screen. I don't want to get into too much detail around them, but we can certainly answer questions about each. We have some programs that work to serve educators and students, and then some that serve families. Some of the other pieces that I think are important to note, public school unit support. So Office of Learning and Recovery and DPI, really, we are committed to working with districts to support them through this work. You've heard about the promising practices. That's one of the ways in which we're looking to help. We've got Career Accelerator and Bridge Academies. The idea there is we're providing some opportunities to really invest in evidence-based programs that lead to student improvement in student performance. And so by modeling some of these programs for districts, we hope they will do the same. We are also working on developing what we're calling ARP learning cohorts. So as you may know, roughly 80% of North Carolina is either rural and or small. And so district capacity in a lot of places, districts need help, particularly with research and evaluation, and that's part of what we are trying to do. And so these learning cohorts, we're really looking at putting districts together who are like-sized or like-appropriated. They receive similar amounts of funding. And then finally, we're committed to building partnerships. Some of these partnerships are inside the state of North Carolina, as you see, including this committee. We have partnerships that we are developing with researchers in higher education institutions throughout North Carolina, but we are also partnering both regionally and nationally. So we are part of the Learning Recovery Network through the Council of Chief State School Officers. This is an invited group. There are 17 states that are part of this, and we are one of them. We have U.S. Department of Education as an unfinished learning group. We're part of that group. Education Commission of the States has a group. We are part of that group. So you can see that we're not only trying to work inside of North Carolina, but we're also trying to take into account kind of the national picture, learn from some other states, what are they seeing well, and then, of course, sharing the work that we're doing here in North Carolina. And in a lot of instances, one of the questions I've had has been around other states and where they're at. And we've worked with a couple of different states at this point. Jenny and I had a phone call with the state of New Jersey on Friday. And honestly, we're actually a good bit ahead of a lot of other states. Part of that is because of our capacity to use data. Having a single SIS is a huge plus for us. And we are one of a few states that have set up an office like ours, an office devoted to ESSER programming and pandemic recovery work. And so I think that's been good. So with that, I am going to figure out how to stop sharing my screen and answer any questions. Okay. Well, it looks like, or Renee stopped sharing my screen for me.
There's a question in the chat, Michael.
Okay, I gotta think my screen is kind of stuck. Can you read it? I can't,
Yeah, absolutely.
I've got like the WebEx poll thing stuck on my screen. It asked me if I want to save the poll. I'm not sure.
It's from Terrence Ruth, and if you wanna read it, feel free. But I'm happy to. How will the findings from the Spencer-funded study be used to advance existing future school practices and functions? I really like that we are investing in this study.
Yeah. So great question. So I think, Terrence, it comes back a little bit to the kind of the philosophy that Jenny and I have really taken with a lot of this work, and it's really about. This isn't about publishing results. And so although we spent the bulk of our careers in higher education, we're not building studies so that we can go to peer-reviewed journals and put these things out. What we're trying to do are build out studies that will have impact on policy and practice in North Carolina. And so the idea is, as the results of studies come out, we'll build out either research briefs or other documents that we will share through the state board and through this group and through our communication directly with district superintendents. In fact, Jenny and I have spent the last couple of weeks traveling the state. We've hit 6 of 8 regions, meeting with superintendents, talking about this work. And so we'll continue to do this kind of sharing.
And we told all of them, we mentioned to all of them who their superintendent representatives were on this committee. So apologies to Dr. Bridges and Dr. Houlihan if y'all are getting some questions from the superintendents around the state.
Yeah, and so I think it's also one of the important things that's happened. So I, being new to DPI myself, Jenny and I were really learning the process for. So how does research work inside of an agency that has not had a research arm in more than 2 decades? And so the normal process is researchers go through our enterprise management and they look for a sponsor inside the building. And if they get that, then they get the data. And oftentimes, I think what has happened is external researchers come in, they get data from North Carolina, then they go out and they publish that data, and we may or may not see something out of it. And what we've tried to do is be a part. Jenny and I are now a part of those conversations when researchers propose a study. She and I actually get to look at the proposal, give some feedback, and then where it's appropriate, we actually partner with either that researcher or with folks inside of the building if they want us to. And part of our requirement now is we are informing researchers that we expect research briefs, we expect presentations to be made available for state board and for others. So whereas that has not always been an expectation, it is now an expectation. And that's always been a capacity issue inside the building too. Other questions?
All right. Well, thank you so much, Michael. We talk about ESSER a lot. My life has been ESSER money since we last met. And so I'm going to show you a lot of slides. And don't worry, I'm not talking about every single item on them. If anything, this is something for you to save and reference as a document should someone bring up ESSER appropriations in the state budget, or you're curious about which organization or nonprofit got how much. So if we go to the next slide. So I just wanted to give an update, not as a representative of the state board, but things that our agency is bringing before state board in February, which is next month. So State Board of Education meets next Wednesday and Thursday. So allotment policies. So these are essentially buckets of money that will be appropriated to, not appropriated, that will be distributed to PSUs based on whatever that calculation is. So I just wanted to give an update that these are ones that our office is not necessarily a business owner of. But in OLR, we've had a couple conversations. We work on so much, as you've seen in the mural board, and we have to remember that this is the ARP Committee of Practitioners. So we want to bring you stuff that is involved in ARP and make sure that you're up to date, even if it's not something that our office is specifically in charge of. So these are just two buckets of money that are coming before the state board in terms of the approval of the allotment policy. So PSUs will then go into a system and apply for these funds based on that calculation and how much they get. There's a couple questions they have to answer, and then once approved by federal programs team, they then receive those funds. So these were in the state budget as ESSER 3 appropriations, and then the next slide I think has a few more. So I will just pause and let y'all look over these three. And so some of these will include research and evaluation metrics that will come from Dr. Korn and her team, Kaylin, and everyone else that is involved in research and evaluation. And so we're working with all of these groups to make sure that we're consistent in what we're trying to measure and what their expectations, that they know our expectations in terms of the research and evaluation and metrics that they should be measuring over the life cycle of these funds. So these funds have to be expended through September 30th, 2024. So they have a little under 2 years to utilize these funds. All right, next slide.
Jenny, this is Amy Marshall. Can I just make a quick comment?
Sure.
I just wanted to say I really love the idea on the National Board Certification Funds, the idea of the schools being able to apply for that, because I think that's a hindrance for many teachers, the cost of applying for National Board. And I think if they could get some sort of relief on that, it would really help.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. So our office is the business owner for this contract, and we are close to the wire to finalizing what this contract looks like. I actually got 2 emails just during this meeting, just on this contract. So we're pushing it towards the finish line. But this is a $13.5 million appropriation for NC EdCore. And those who aren't familiar, this is started in the governor's office and is now spun off as a nonprofit. And their core mission is to recruit, train, and deploy tutors into our public school units. And so it's very important work. And so this is our contract that we're the business owner of that's coming before state board next week. Okay, next one. And again, so there's like a bunch of these slides, and I am not going to go through every one of these line items. So Michael last month in our meeting had a kind of a quick image of this. So I kind of broke it down a little more now that we, as an agency, have been able to kind of dive into it and really process what needs to be done. Is it a contract? Is it an MOU? Is it an allotment file, which is what we just discussed, where the PSUs actually apply and receive the funds under certain guidance and calculations. So I have grouped them based on the amount of the budget. And so most of these, or a lot of these, were actually in the mural board as a reference. So what I would really like to point out is kind of our work as OLR, who we are the business owner or business partner in many of these. So I'm assisting the CTE team with kind of helping build out the national, the hospitality one. That's the $400,000. We're going to do an MOU with the North Carolina Museum of Art for some digital teaching and learning programs, which is going to be really awesome. Schools That Lead is on here as well. And while we're not necessarily a business owner or partner, I'm sure Dr. Korn's team will have some input into research and evaluation metrics. So if we can go to the next slide. The 1 to 2 million, again, you can kind of see our name on some of them. The contract with third-party entity to assess the impact of COVID-19. And then a lot of these you'll see are kind of reimbursements or there's the database. So some of these are with IT. After school robotics grant program, that will now go before the board probably in March. And that'll be an allotment to the PSUs for an after school robotics grant program, similar to like First NC. So next slide. This is the 2 to 3 million. So I'll just give you a second to look at this one. All right, Renee, we can move to the next one. So the 3 to 10 million, there's kind of a jump there, but just trying to group them together. So community and schools is in this one as well. And so we'll be that head for the MOU with the UNC Board of Governors. Michael will serve as the point for that one. I'm working very closely, and Dr. Korn and I are working very closely with the Innovation Project. We hope to have them before, we don't hope, they will come before the board in March. So that is going to be really exciting. And then Michael had already referenced or previously referenced the software platform for the $9 million, the CBE platform that he's working with IT and Dr. Molinex on. All right, next slide. And so previously mentioned the NC Ed Corps, the $13.5 million appropriation, which is going before the board next week. And then I think, Michael, that might be the only one on this one. And then, so this is kind of, this is the one I want to kind of pause on. I know that when Michael opened the meeting today, he talked about, we won't always just be talking at you, right? Hopefully soon we'll be able to engage and actually get your feedback that we definitely want in terms of creation of some of these programs. And we have 2 appropriations of $36 million. And so if we're just thinking of timeline, my goal is to get these on state board in May, just so school districts can apply before fiscal year closeout. If not, we might need to push it back a little bit, but that would be my ideal goal if we could do that. But we have ideas around what we would like to do with these 2 pots of money, but I think once we fine tune what those ideas are and have something that we could show you, I think that's something that we would certainly work with the newly elected chair and soon to be newly elected vice chair to bring before this group to discuss and fine tune, because that's a lot of money. We want to make sure that we're creating programs that align with what has been done before, that have the right research and evaluation metrics, the data behind it, and that will really support the students of North Carolina. And I think that's it. So are there any questions? My disclosure is I don't want to dive too deeply into like one specific program. But if there's any questions about kind of what our role is in that, I'm happy to talk about kind of the process. But if not, I can move forward with the next slides. All right, so I talked at you a lot last month, and so yeah, Luann, so absolutely, right? So we are trying to create a one master shelf for some of these appropriations. So for those who aren't familiar, there's a kind of an online software they have to log into, and they actually have to apply for each of them. And it's a separate application, and it's just a little cumbersome, right? It takes time, and the central office is not equal in each school district. Some have an entire team dedicated to this. Some have a central office. Some PSUs have a central office of maybe a handful of people, right? And so and they still have the same number of applications many times. So I will say, Luann, that we're working with the federal programs team here in the agency to streamline at least the shell, and that some of these applications are within that main shell. So it's not having to go through the technical guidance and all of the webinars multiple times so we can streamline that. We're trying the best we can. There are certainly, I would say, powers at play that we can't always control in terms of timelines and stuff like that, but we do fully publicly acknowledge what kind of a burden it can be to apply for all of these funds, and especially if they aren't large allotments, right? Based on the calculation, for those, again, who aren't familiar, some of these allotments could just be a couple $100s. So then the PSUs are going to weigh, is it worth our time to submit the application and then have to go through kind of the monitoring and the audit process for $1,000? And a lot of times that answer might be no. So thank you for acknowledging that, Luann. It's on our radar. Will there be specifically appropriated funding for English learners? So all of the funds have been appropriated, but Michael, I don't know if you can speak better.
Yeah, I can speak to that. So Naji, yes. So while we have not stipulated in some of these earlier programs like the Bridge Academy and the Career Accelerator any specific demographic subgroup, there is the potential to do that going forward. However, we have to, basically we would base that on the release of the data that's going to happen in March, right? So the idea is that these funds should be prioritized for students who have been disproportionately impacted by COVID. And so basically we'll have that data set available to districts in March. And so one of the things we can do as we are building these out is think about how do districts prioritize participation in programs. And so that'll be an important part of the conversation.
And to Sharonda, that's a great question. So PRC 188 and PRC, so PRC means I think program report code. And they're numbered based on, how many there are. So 188 and 189, I believe, are 36 million. I just want to double check. Okay.
And so, Lynn, I think this is an example of like Career Accelerator, where when we wrote in the guidance says you essentially have a partnership between the school and an industry partner, because that program is built around career credentialing, right, Lynn?
Yes, correct.
Right. So we could have this conversation with this committee when we're building out the guidance to think about what that might look like.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great thing to keep asking, Sharonda, and keep it at the forefront, because I think it is important to create a program that aligns with the work that we're already doing, two of which are the programs that are on the screen now. And so I would love to continue that conversation as we move forward with shaping these two appropriations, which I probably need to start on next month. So.
Yeah, and
so we can
this will be a great.
Renee, one slide, please.
Yep, this will be a great having folks on this committee working with us as we're building out guidance. I think will be really helpful in thinking about programs that we ultimately develop with those two pots of money.
Absolutely. And so I gave a big overview of these two. If you access this document through Simply, you can get to the links. These are the Summer Bridge Academies, Summer Career Accelerators. I just wanted to give an update. This closed in December, and so all 115 LEAs, all 115 school districts applied for the funds for both. 71 charter schools applied and received the funds for the Summer Bridge Academies, and 53 charter schools applied for 177, which is the Career Accelerator, which is the workforce aligned. And one of the reasons that this might be a difference is not all charter schools are K-12, and so this is 6-12, and so some charter schools just wouldn't have been eligible, or maybe they only have up through grade 6 or up through grade 8, and so the allotment wasn't very large. So, and actually, I did want to say, and I forgot to say this on the previous slide, and you don't have to go back, Renee, but a lot of these larger appropriations that I showed in all of those blocks will actually be coming before this committee to present on an annual basis. And so I am working that into the contracts that I am in charge of. And so, for instance, NC EdCore is going before the state board next month. And they have a quarterly reporting requirement, as will many other of these large appropriations, and they will have reporting requirements to this body because it is a lot of money, and we just want to make sure that this group understands what's being done with those funds. All right, and on the next slide, just a breakdown of just kind of disaggregating some of the responses in the program plans. I did ask 2 questions, and this is actually, I might send an email out after this meeting sometime this week for like a call for those who are interested. But I asked, are there existing workforce models you would like to incorporate into your summer program? You see 53 said no, 32 said maybe. And so of those who said no specifically, would you be interested in learning more, essentially? And you can see the 32, 18, and 3 gave no response. So I am going to reach out to all 53 of those in terms of accessing support and starting. They might have said no, but they're going to hear from me anyway. And starting next week, they're going to get some emails from me on a regular basis in terms of support, and we're going to be launching some office hours and some webinars where districts who are doing similar things, or PSUs who are doing similar things, specifically with 177, can find time to cross-collaborate and idea share. So with that said, I may come back to this group to kind of as a think tank in terms of options for some of the PSUs that I may not have, or our group has not identified kind of plug and play or resources for. And I can dive deeper into that in the email that I send out. So that would potentially be my ask from this group, is help identifying industry partners or workforce models for these 53 PSUs who, and some of them, I think a fair amount of them are charter schools. So we're here to help, but I certainly would love the help from you to make sure we're providing the best input and guidance to our PSUs that we can. And Renee, I believe that is my last slide. So if there are any questions, maybe 1 minute, but I know we want to make sure to get to Jenny's research and evaluation updates. So if you want to post the questions in the chat, I can respond to the chat.
All right, is it a good time for me to go ahead and transition, Michael? Okay, awesome. Thank you all for your participation and attention this afternoon. Can you all hear me okay? Michael, can you? Yes, okay, great. All right, well, so for those that I haven't had a chance to meet, my name is Danny Korn. I am the Director of Research and Evaluation for the Office of Learning Recovery here at DPI. Been on the staff since August. Prior to that, had the pleasure of working with a lot of the people on the committee through the work I led at the Friday Institute, and then also at my future NC. So really glad to have everybody here. If you'll go to the next slide, Renee. So I tried to think about how we wanted to talk about kind of the big picture strategy for research and evaluation for learning recovery. And I've been kind of building these and, editing, and as we've had some conversations around the state, as I've been talking to people inside the building, at the board, and then externally. And so hopefully you've heard pieces of this throughout the conversation over the past hour and a half, that we are really working to gather input and build consensus around the research and evaluation priorities for learning recovery. This committee is critical in that conversation and getting feedback to us as a representative of different groups from around the state, different student groups and parent voices, and so really open to feedback. The conversation and how y'all have been jumping in, asking questions about data and research. I think that's wonderful, and I'm happy to continue to have that type of dialogue. The other thing that we've recognized is a good role for us is, thank you, Renee, is this coordinating state level research and evaluation studies. That's what we're going to talk a little bit more about today. So I keep thinking about us as like air traffic controllers. Like there's this amazing wealth of research resources in this state. And there's an enormous amount of work going on in the schools, in the districts, at the state. And so trying to like coordinate how we're connecting researchers to practitioners and then sharing that information back broadly. So what we're going to talk a little bit about today is this coordinating state level research and evaluation studies that's highlighted number 2, but just quickly I'll talk about a few other pieces. The other piece that's really near and dear to my heart, work I've always done when I was at the Friday Institute, is this idea of building local capacity for local district and school level leaders to use their own data or use data being shared by the state to partner with the state on designing research and evaluation studies at the local level. We're also working to hire experts in quantitative methodologies and qualitative methodologies at DPI to serve as resources to both people in the building, at the state level, as well as our partners in the PSUs. And then finally, Lynn mentioned this when she was reviewing the ESSER 3 funds, is we've kind of been driving everybody crazy with promoting the use of ESSER dollars, a proportion of those funds, for continuous improvement. If we don't ask in advance for the vendors, for the partners, for the districts to think about the implementation and impact of these funds and have a process for them reporting that back, it just won't get done. And so we want to make sure that we're trying to be strategic about how those dollars are used and then what the feedback loop is. If you'll go to the next slide, Renee. So, and Michael mentioned a lot of these, so I'm really not going to kind of go through, but just be aware that there are, and these are the studies that we know about, right? So, like we found out about another one this morning, that there is a funded study from Fordham that wants to look at mobility in charter schools around the state. And we were like, well, that's great, but how does that feed into like the larger, bigger understanding of the pandemic's impact on student learning? So really, again, trying to be very kind of strategic and proactive as opposed to reactive, which is what's typically been the role. Like instead of kind of having a lot of ownership and directing the way the research is being conducted using North Carolina data sets and school partners, like it's just been a very kind of haphazard process in the past. And we're really hoping that we can bring some order a little bit to the chaos. So specifically, and this question's been asked, actually has come up a number of times today, and I saw it in the chat, is we've got so much quantitative data in the state. We are data rich, information poor, we talk a lot about that. So how can we take what we're seeing in the quantitative data, and like the SAS study, the one that's listed, the first one listed on this bulleted list, like the COVID-19 lost instructional time impact analysis? How can we take that data as an example and ask some questions about why? Where are we seeing positive outliers during this pandemic? And then how can we use funds and be very intentional about elevating student, teacher, administrative voice, parent voice through qualitative research? So we dedicated $500,000 from ESSER 2 as a commitment to elevating those important critical stakeholder voices. You go to the next slide, Renee. And, back way, yep, there we go. So this will focus, this qualitative research is managed by our office. This is one of the groups that we will have presenting to the ARP Committee of Practitioners. The focus is OLR interventions during the last summer or this upcoming summer. The summer bridge, the career accelerator. So that's kind of the focus. We want to know what was the student's experience in summer school? How can we tell the story of what a parent thought about students participating in career accelerator? We have 4 partners. We're going to do 4 regional studies. We have 4 universities, state universities that are going to be our partners on this. ECU will be leading the work in the eastern part of the state, NC State, and then in working collaboratively with Duke University, will be leading the kind of north central part of the state. UNCG, the Serve Center, will be focused on the south central part of the state, and then our friends at EPIC at UNC Chapel Hill will be doing the western part of the state. They are going to be doing case studies and interviews and focus groups, reviewing documents, so that they can pull together deliverables like research briefs and contributing to the promising practices, stakeholder presentations, and to try to capture these stories in a systematic way. And they're also going to be working together. So we had a kickoff meeting with the individual university research teams, just like a kind of one-on-one, and really recognized that a lot of the work that we're going to want to be doing should be in partnership, should be working collaboratively, since we're kind of focused on the same sorts of things. And so I'm excited. I think it'll help build those partnerships with university researchers, with people in the department, with the folks on this committee. So we're really excited about kicking that off. I think Michael and I are planning on updating the board next month on that. So this is not like we haven't kind of formally announced and have those contracts in hand, but that's kind of the plan that we've got, and wanted to let this group know that in advance. So we're really excited about this and looking forward to sharing and working through this process with this committee. Michael, did you want to jump in?
Just very quickly, I just wanted to say thanks to Tamika for pointing out when we talk about educators in this, we can reiterate to the researchers that we are interested in everyone who participated in these, right? So we do want to hear from instructional assistants, and we do want to hear from cafeteria staff and bus drivers, and so any of those staff who worked with students this summer, yeah, we want to get the full picture. So thanks for pointing that out. We'll make that note. That's why this committee is important, right? Okay. Any additional questions? All right. Well, so at this point, we do have an opportunity for any other comments, questions, anything anybody wants to bring to the group before we move to our second vote. Okay. Renee, are we ready to vote for the vice chair?
We are ready. I'll open the poll now. It looks like everyone has participated. Is there anyone still deciding? All right, I'll close the poll.
Okay, and are we same process, Renee? You'll read the results and...
Michael, will you declare the winner, please? These votes will be displayed in the minutes.
Okay, thank you. So congratulations to Tamika Walker-Kelly, who will serve as Vice Chair of the ARP Committee of Practitioners. Let me make sure I read this properly. The committee members selected for the position of Vice Chair is Tamika Walker-Kelly. She will serve through the completion of her term, and the term dates will be listed in the minutes. So thank you all for voting. Congratulations to Dr. Bridges and Ms. Walker-Kelly. We look forward to working with you in the future. So at this point, I would like to thank committee members, advisors, and staff for your preparation for the discussions. I'll remind committee members that our next monthly meeting will be held on Tuesday, February 22nd from 3 to 5 p.m. We've now completed our meeting, and unless there's additional business at this time, I'll ask the newly elected ARP committee chair to adjourn our meeting. So if you will call for the motion in the second, I would appreciate it.
Just want to say thank you to everybody. Looking forward to leading and working with you all. And I'll ask that for adjournment for the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
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 Thank you.
Who is that moved? First move?
Dr. Houlihan.
Yep.
Thank you. Who was second?
I think I was the first, Sharonda Fleming.
Thank you.
All right, and we need a quick vote, Renee, or?
We have voted. Tamika Walker-Kelly is our new vice chair.
And do we need to vote to adjourn, or are we adjourned?
We do need to vote for adjourn. I think we've had a second, so we need our chair to please adjourn our meeting.
Thank you. I'll adjourn the meeting. Are we saying we need folks to vote to say adjourned?
Folks have already voted. Well, we just need you to fill this out.
Okay, thank you. You all have a great week. Take care.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And Dr. Bridges and Tamika, we can hang on for a minute if you have any other questions before you jump off.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
So just as kind of the usual order of business for some of these, we've tried to model this group off of our Pepsi work. And so in terms of the format for running the meeting.
Hey, Michael, sorry to interrupt just real quick. We might still be live streaming. I just wanted to flag that. I didn't know if once the meeting ended, if you guys wanted to turn that off.
Oh,
yes, one moment.
Mute the SBE.
I'm reaching out.
Okay, so I muted the SBE audio. Does that work, you think?
He needs to close it out from SBE audio.
Okay, so, well, I'm not saying anything that's, yeah.
I just wanted to make sure you were.
Yeah. So essentially, we've tried to model the process and the procedure after Pepsi because that's a long-established group at this time, and we follow all of the law, and so nobody gets in trouble with any of that stuff.